This is Danny Flexen for Seconds Out. Delighted to welcome back the long-awaited return of DiBella's Digest. And as you can see, especially for our huge female demographic, Lou is back in the pool by popular demand. Lou,
Yes,
how's your probably 2 weeks now been?
You know, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but it's been a very disheartening few weeks in boxing for a lot of reasons, and it's not blamed on one person. I think we've had a couple of weeks in which we've celebrated some of our. You can still see me.
Yeah, you're back.
I think these last couple of weeks have been a monument to some of our greatest deficiencies as a sport and an industry. And I really don't want to start harping on it because honestly, I'm partially waiting in a pool on a Monday because I woke up this morning just sort of depressed about the general state of things without pointing a finger at any particular one thing. I just think the sport I've dedicated my life to and have loved since I'm 8 years old, it's becoming harder and harder to love it the same way. And I'm barely feeling like much of a fan these days. And I'm as big a fan as probably as Walk the Earth. If you look at my life and how I've dedicated it to boxing, it's sort of depressing and disheartening, a lot of what we've seen lately.
Well, I don't think this is going to cheer you up, but I do want to ask you about some of the key headlines, if you like, coming out of the Triller show at the weekend. Most notably, the Evander Holyfield fight, which didn't end quite the way I was expecting, but I thought it'd be a sad ending, but not necessarily so quick. What did you make of it, and how can we prevent things like this in the future, I guess, is a key question.
I mean, look, there's an association of boxing commissions in the United States. Okay, now they don't have any kind of governmental power, but they're the organization of all the regulators in the United States. Where were they the other night? There's a Florida State Athletic Commission. Where were they the other night? There's a California commission and a New York commission that wouldn't license Holyfield. Why wasn't that relevant? And I guess I'm not going to point the finger at any one person for what happened the other night. And you also have to remember something. Evander Holyfield and the people around him. Look, the referee stopped and jumped in before Evander took any significant punishment whatsoever. Yeah. So Evander didn't walk out the other night in worse shape than when he walked in. And in fact, he probably walked out the other night with financial security for the rest of his life that he didn't have when he walked in. So I'm not going to get all holier than thou on everybody involved. However, did I enjoy watching what I saw? No, I had the same reaction that you had and most people that love boxing had and most people that loved Evander had. But the flip side of it is he got paid an awful lot of money and achieved probably security he didn't have for the rest of his life. I'm more troubled that there is nobody in the world of boxing in any position of authority, from governmental entities to regulatory entities to sanctioning bodies to commissioners to anybody that was able to stop the other night from getting licensed and happening. And that's extremely troubling. I'll leave it at that, but that's extremely troubling. And it points out the tremendous deficiency we have from a health and safety standpoint or from any standpoint, including results of fights, judging, refereeing. We don't adequately protect our athletes, our fighters, and we don't protect any type of integrity of our sport. Frankly, our sport at the moment has no integrity, and there's no one person to blame. And by the way, those people who want to, I've been saying the same things for 25 years plus in this business, and I care about the sport, and I've tried to say things to make it better. I've tried to attempt to move people toward reform. I've had zero success. So with respect to all of you who want to troll me on social media and say, hey, motherfucker, you've been in it forever, so how come it hasn't changed? I accept that. And it's one of the reasons why I'm wading in a swimming pool right now, contemplating my own life, because I accept that. It's a reasonable point of view. I have stayed in this industry and this sport despite my inability to effectuate any kind of meaningful change. And despite the fact I think that what I think I have been overwhelmingly a positive voice for boxing in the course of my time in the sport. But has my voice mattered very much? I guess not. So, all of you trolling pieces of shit that want to continue to take shots at me and say, well, hey, you haven't been able to change it, I say I accept that criticism because you're right. I'm still part of it, begrudgingly some days, very difficult, with great difficulty on most days lately. I am still part of it. And no, I haven't been able to change it. And I accept that critique.
What about the apparent demand for these aging former champions, these legends, to come back? Is it because we're not doing enough in boxing to create current fights that fans want to see?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great part of it, obviously. I mean, look, most of the fights that of what we consider to be pure, real boxing, quote unquote, whatever that means, we're putting out an awful lot of shit product. And that's all over the world. You know, it's supposed to be a competition. Boxing's a beautiful thing when fights are equally matched.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'd rather watch a Vences Carroll fight evenly matched than watch some superstar fighter fighting a nobody who has no chance of competing with him. So, I mean, I just saw something like, I have tremendous respect for Lee Selby, but am I excited to see Devin Haney against Lee Selby as a fight? And by the way, that's the top end of fights that are occurring. I'm not criticizing that fight. That's at least an acceptable fight on paper. But is it the kind of fight that's going to get people excited that they have to stay home, they have to get to the arena to watch it? I don't know. And that's a good fight. I mean, that's a solid fight. There are so many fights scheduled right now in what's supposed to be legitimate boxing that are so non-compelling that I mean, we are inviting the kind of stuff that's happening. Now, that being said, also, part of the problem is just like the general public. We have become a niche sport. The general public in the United States of America knows Roy Jones, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor, Jake Paul, Logan Paul. Those names are more familiar than the majority of our champions.
Yeah.
Now, Canelo has a huge name and huge star power. But other than that, among active fighters, it's a very limited list of fighters that really mean anything at the box office or at the gate.
Yeah, I mean, you look at guys like Spence, Crawford, even Lomachenko, and they're the best fighters, top 5 probably pound for pound at the moment, and they won't be as well known as a lot of the names you just mentioned.
Yeah, and that's partially we're not making the biggest and best fights. Our best, most talented fighters aren't becoming pop culture figures. We're not turning our fighters into stars. There are no 4 kings, because in order to be the king, you have to be recognized by the majority of people as the king. So don't tell me that any 4 fighters in any weight class in 2021 boxing are Hagler, Hearns, Leonard, and Durant. They're not. They're also not Ali, Frazier, Foreman, and whoever else you want to, Norton. I mean, like they're not. We're in a different place and time. And a majority of fights that are being televised around the world on a regular basis are domestic UK fights and domestic shows elsewhere. And frankly, the domestic shows in the United States haven't featured the best fighting the best. And for the most part, neither have they in the UK or any place else. And look, we have to be willing to be self-critical, because if we're not going to be self-critical, we better be willing to accept the clown fuck that is now the status quo.
What can we do, or is it beyond repair now with the fractured sport, the different governing bodies, the different broadcasters and long-term contracts, or is there still a way back for traditional boxing?
I mean, there's a greater way back in a country like the UK where there's a much greater interest, because I do think in the UK, a Tyson, Joshua date certain, and a big build up to that fight invigorates the whole sport. I think that the winner of that fight could emerge as the superstar of the heavyweight division. That could invigorate that sport. And you guys over in the UK care enough that if you have a young, super exciting, charismatic fighter, he can become a new savior, if you will, of boxing. Whereas in the United States, I think the general interest is so low that I don't think one fighter is going to change our landscape so quickly. Can boxing come back? Anything that's eternal and has gone through waves in the past can come back. But we're dipping in the United States to new levels and new waves that it's going to be a little bit more difficult.
Now, just on a more of a left field subject, just before I let you go, because I know people, having seen your Twitter feed and mine, will be curious. What happened with your boat, and is it still afloat?
My boat is afloat. All the electronic systems in the boat got wet, so I'm sort of like stranded, a little bit like Gilligan. I'm stranded in Long Island,
Right.
But my boat is not seaworthy.
Yeah.
My boat is not seaworthy in the moment, Danny, but it will make a triumphant return in the spring of 2022.
That's what we're looking forward to. Ship shape once again. Brilliant. Well, at least we're ending on a...
When you're bent out of shape, floating around in a pool in an 80-degree sunny day, one of the last days of summer in New York, is not the worst way to unwind a little bit. You know, I'm sitting here. It's not the most easy thing to do this podcast while I'm treading water, which is what I'm doing. But it's been enjoyable. It was tough to see Evander go out the way he did. Interestingly, I hate to say this, but after I watched that, my first thought was, I wonder what would have happened tonight had Belfort been in the ring with Oscar De La Hoya. I did have that reaction, and that's sort of, on one level, that's wild, and on the other level, it's a little bit sad, but I did have that reaction.
You may still get to find out.
And I'll tell you the other thing, Anderson Silva can throw hands a little bit. You know, I mean, that was another observation. And then, look, I'm a big John O'Carroll fan. I like fighters who give 110%, have personality and charisma, and they're always in interesting fights. And Vences, I thought, fought pretty well. I thought that was an entertaining fight. But watching Evander Holyfield, I mean, a lot of people should be ashamed for licensing Evander Holyfield. The fact that, from a health and safety standpoint, a commission, U.S. regulatory standpoint, standpoint of state regulation in boxing, the fact that Evander Holyfield at 58 years old was licensed to get into the ring looking like that and in condition is a travesty.
I agree. What can I say? I mean, let's hope lessons have been learned. Although, as you've said earlier, it may just be futile. So many efforts have been in the past, but we hope not.
I hope not. And I'm going to hang up and do a few laps now because I need them. But I'll talk to you soon, Danny. Good to talk to you.
Enjoy.